Hello everyone and welcome back to a new Planet Zoo video. But this time we are discussing potential speculation for Planet Zoo 2. So Planet Zoo 2 has been up in the air for a while now, and with Frontier addressing Planet Zoo as Planet Zoo 1 in their latest financial report, it's pretty safe to say that a sequel to Planet Zoo is more and more likely by the day, really. So our last pack was the Asia Animal Pack. Now, I'm not saying it is the last pack, but given we haven't really received much in terms of updates on the dev cycle for PC edition, especially going off the latest Frontier Unlocked live stream, I'm saying that maybe there's a chance, there's definitely a chance that Planet Zoo PC has finished support and they're working on number 2 now, but you never know. But better early than late. So I'm going to give you my top 100 species that I want to see. Now personally, given Planet Zoo is not in the same position as Jurassic World Evolution 3 in that you don't have to make 2 new models per species, because you've already been doing that since the beginning, so that's not really an issue here. So a majority, if not all, the species that we currently have can make it into Planet Zoo 3, Planet Zoo 2. I mean, I don't think we'll get to Planet Zoo 3, and if we do, what would it be? But if I were to cut 2, it'd be Titan Beetle and Goliath Frog, just because they do not have any captive representation. And I'd also lump the subspecies into whole species, so that would probably bring us down to 203 animals in the roster overall. So yeah, this is just my list. It's not anyone else's list. I'm going off based on species that I would really like to see. Your list could be very different to this, but basically I've picked animals that I think would just be a real thrill to have in Planet Zoo 2. So let's get into it. First being the notorious tiger shark, my personal favourite of the great sharks, and certainly a species that I would love to see in an aquarium in Planet Zoo 2. Next is the formidable Philippine eagle, a critically endangered species from the Philippines. A beautiful eagle, like it has probably the nicest patterning, well, some of the nicest patterning of any birds, as well as that crown of feathers that it can raise when it's threatened. And this one might be odd to many of you. It is the impala, a almost comically common antelope in Africa. They are often nicknamed the McDonald's of the bush, as they are literally the animal that most predators go to eat. Like, they're so common, so widespread. Animals like lions, cheetahs, wild dogs, hyenas, leopards, all sorts of animals often target the impala just because it is probably the easiest prey item to bring down. Not that it isn't challenging, but it's surprising given how common and famous this animal is from Africa that we do not have it in Planet Zoo already. Now we start to get into a couple of new exhibit species, so the first being the prehensile-tailed, aka the Solomon Island skink. So this species is well known for having a prehensile tail that helps it move through the trees. And I've actually met one of these in person, and they are a very cool little animal. I say little, they're probably one of the larger skinks, but it would be really nice to get a bit more lizard diversity. Next we have the longest snake in the world, the reticulated python. I picked this over the green anaconda simply because I love the reticulated patterning. I don't know what, I made up a new word, but it has a little bit of an iridescence to it. So like, shine a particular light on it, you could get some rainbow colours like you can see in this image here. But they are just a beautiful snake, and I would love to see them in Planet Zoo 2. Next we have one of my favourite birds, the lammergeier, aka the bearded vulture. One of the most widespread of all raptors found across Eurasia and into Africa. Like, they are found in all those mountain ranges pretty much. But they're a very cool looking bird, so named because of the long feathers that can come down from the lower jaw. But they come in a range of colors too. Like there can be individuals that are just red. So like there's a lot of good color variation in this species. Then we have the black-capped squirrel monkey. So this species is the one that I am most familiar with. So we don't actually have any common / Guianan squirrel monkeys here in Australia. We only have these guys. And personally, comparing the two, I like this one more. It just has a much more vibrant pattern, and I just think is more colorful than the common squirrel monkey. So I would certainly prefer this guy over the common if we were to get any of the squirrel monkeys. Another aquarium species is the magnificent humphead wrasse. So this species is found in reefs around the Indian, Indo-Pacific and Western Pacific Ocean. So it is an endangered species, largely due to climate change and hunting, but it is just one of those fish that you think of when you think of a coral reef. Like this is just a magnificent animal that would go well alongside your reef sharks and reef fish. Then we have another beautiful species that I've actually seen in person. I've actually seen them leaping out of the water too. So this is the white-spotted eagle ray. Easily one of the most eye-catching of all the rays due to those beautiful spots that it has on its back. Certainly an animal that I would love to just see brought to life in an aquarium in Planet Zoo 2. It is just such a beautiful ray that it would be a shame if it was missed. Another lizard species, the Philippine sailfin lizard. So this species is of course from the Philippines, much like the Philippine eagle. I just feel like the Philippines as a whole need a bit more diversity. Like they have so many cool animals over there that we should definitely get some diversity to be able to make a section of our zoos dedicated to that country. But yeah, these species are very similar to another animal that's coming up in the list, in that they have the ability to run across water, but they just look so much like a dragon or even an ancient dinosaur-like creature. Like they just look prehistoric, so it certainly would make a very cool addition to an exhibit. Another very cool lizard is the caiman lizard. So these are related to the tegus, but spend most of their time in and around water. So they get their name from the scutes that they have on their backs, which resemble that of the more local crocodilians that they share their home with, the caiman. So this species is also very colourful with a bright red head and a bluish green body. So they'd certainly stand out in the water where they'd be found. Keeping with the lizard theme, personally one of my favourite lizards, mostly because I'm a sucker for the colour blue. This is the blue iguana, so a very famous endangered species, almost wiped out entirely until conservation efforts helped to bring it back from the brink. So they are just a conservation success story really, and are widespread in a range of high profile zoos. But given its blue coloration, it would just really stand out against most of the other lizards that we could have in the game. And against most of the animals, as we really do not have a lot of blue animals in Planet Zoo, which is a bit of a shame. But then again, blue is not necessarily a natural colour. It is formed by reactions to sunlight and pigments in the skin of blue animals. Then we have the rufous-tailed hummingbird. So hummingbirds in general would just be a really cool bird to have in the game, just to create a nice walk-through exhibit for them. Just have them fluttering around, moving in all the directions that they are able to, because hummingbirds, as many of you I assume would know, are able to hover in place, fly backwards, fly upside down, in all sorts of directions. I picked the rufous-tailed as it is one of the most common in captivity and also one of the most colourful. You can't really see it from this image, but when they open their wings, they are a very stunning little bird. As mentioned before with the Philippine sailfin lizard, the plumed basilisk shares a very similar lifestyle, inhabiting the river systems of Central America rather than the Philippines, and is probably the more vibrant of the two, as this species is well known for having a bright green coloration with blue hints across its body. But this species is probably better known than the sailfin lizard for its ability to run across water. waiting on a branch above the water, and when a predator spooks it, it leaps down and runs across the water. It is only able to do this with the long toes that help it create a splash, and also being fairly light so it doesn't sink. And lizards are generally hydrophobic anyway, so it helps it from not really getting too wet either. Next we have the Nicobar pigeon, one of the most colourful of all the pigeons, and is more important than most for a very good reason, and that is it is the living descendant of, or at least the only living relative of, the extinct dodo from Mauritius. So this species is found on a range of different islands in the Indian Ocean, so one of the most notable being Christmas Island, I believe they are found on. I think at least, don't quote me on that, I just heard it somewhere. But they are a very beautiful species that I've seen in a variety of walk-through rainforest aviaries. So it would make sense to include it here, not just because it is related to the dodo, but also that's why I've picked it here. Next is probably a less flattering bird, the northern bald ibis. Despite having a bald head much like a vulture and eyes that would make even Sauron jealous, this bird is very important for conservation, as it used to be found across Europe back 400 years ago, I believe it was, when it became extinct on the continent. But since then, conservation efforts have been working to reintroduce them into Europe, and it's proving to be quite successful, with the conservationists able to lead the chicks on their migratory routes, so establishing a new population in Europe for the future. Another very famous bird is the shoebill, one of the most intimidating birds you could ever lay your eyes upon. Found in the wetlands of Central Eastern Africa, this species is well known for its intimidating glare when it looks straight at you. They also have the ability to clap their beaks so fast that it sounds like machine gun fire, which I think would just be quite a haunting sound to hear in your zoos. But they are just a magnificent bird, and one that is quite rare in zoos, so if you're able to include one in your Planet Zoo, it would certainly be a great addition. A fairly common primate in zoos around the world is the mantle geriza, also known as the eastern black and white colobus monkey. So this species is well known for the hanging white fur that comes down from its back and off the end of its tail. So they're very striking primates found in the rainforests of Eastern Africa, and would certainly make a good addition given their prevalence in zoos. Another African species fairly common in zoos is the reclusive serval. So this cat is quite common in zoos and is very similar to the caracal in a few ways. They both have large ears, as well as long legs that allow them to leap straight up into the air and catch birds mid-flight. But the serval has a spotted pattern, and I would say it's probably more common in zoos than the caracal. But yeah, they are just a beautiful cat, and if you wanted to mix it up and have two different kinds of small savanna cats, or either just be able to pick between the caracal and the serval for your zoos, adding the serval in would certainly get that going. Next is one of my favourite birds, the palm cockatoo. So this species is found in northern Australia and Papua New Guinea, well known for their red cheeks, their huge beaks, and their black coloration, but also the unique behaviour that the males display, where they will drum inside of tree hollows using a stick to attract their mates. Possibly one of my most requested animals is the Goodfellows tree kangaroo, one of the more unique varieties of marsupial out there. It is a kangaroo that lives in trees with reduced hind feet, better suited to living in trees than on the ground, and a long tail that helps it balance. Yeah, they are very cool little animals with pretty surprisingly good camouflage. Even though they look quite conspicuous here, get the right shades of light coming through the canopy, it would disappear and you would not be able to see it. But they're very common in zoos, and tied with the Matchies tree kangaroo in the Planet Zoo community, really, as to which one that players would prefer. Personally, I prefer this one, as it is the only one of the two that I have actually seen in person, and personally I think this one might be a little bit cuter. Next edition is another animal that I'm pretty sure has a prehensile tail. It might not, but the southern tamandua is a tree anteater, so related to the giant anteater, but is able to climb as it is small enough and lean enough to do so. With a similar behaviour, hunts for termites, using its long powerful claws to break in, but they're also quite cute and fairly common in zoos as well. So like, if you are playing franchise mode, can't afford a giant anteater but can afford a tamandua, would probably fill the same niche in your zoo. The Linnaeus' two-toed sloth is the most common sloth housed in zoos today. The current brown-throated sloth in Planet Zoo is only found in one facility outside of its native range, that being the Dallas World Aquarium in the United States. So yeah, they're really not a common sight, but Linnaeus' two-toed sloth is quite a common sight. Now I've never seen one, as no zoo in Australia currently has sloths, but yeah, if you were to go to a zoo and they say they have a sloth, it's more likely to be this one than just about any other, so it makes sense to include it. A antelope that's quite common in zoos is, well, the common eland. So these are one of the largest of all antelope, getting to almost a ton in weight. They are also surprisingly elegant for their size, able to leap a couple meters into the air, despite being so massive. But I've seen these guys several times housed alongside zebras and giraffes and white rhinos, and certainly would make a great addition to the savannah to be somewhat more of a bulky antelope to have next to the rest of the animals. Another species fairly common in Australia is the aoudad, aka the Barbary sheep from northern Africa. So this species here in Australia is commonly displayed alongside the dromedary camel and sometimes the scimitar-horned oryx as well. And I think the same can be said in other zoos around the world too, because they do live in a similar environment, certainly suited to a much warmer climate than most sheep and goat species, and certainly would make a dramatic addition, with the males sporting huge horns and a great long beard. Another beautiful little bird to add into Planet Zoo 2 is the Bali myna, a critically endangered species from, of course, the island of Bali in Indonesia, known for the blue skin around their eyes and their bright snow white feathers. This species would certainly be an eye-catching addition to a rainforest aviary, being sort of a blink and you'll miss it, but they're certainly a beautiful bird that I would love to see in the game. One of the more, or should I say, less popular penguin species, surprisingly, that players want to see in the game is the gentoo penguin. So I've seen more people suggest the rockhopper, and I can understand why, but in zoos and aquariums, you generally have the dynamic duo of the king penguin and the gentoo penguin. It's more likely that you'll see the king penguin join together with gentoos in an exhibit than a king penguin and a rockhopper. Like, these two are just housed together. Like, it is just the way it is. These guys are so common alongside the kings. Almost every king penguin exhibit you'll see, you'll have a gentoo penguin or two or more in with them, and they are one of the fastest penguins in the sea, so they'd be fairly fast in the water too, and would actually be our first animal from the actual continent of Antarctica, because even though king penguins are from the sub-Antarctic region, there is no population known that actually resides on Antarctica's shores, so it'd be great to actually get a species from Antarctica itself. One of the most beautiful and magnificent of all birds is the Ragiana bird of paradise. One of the most striking birds that Planet Zoo 2 could ever implement, with its unique courtship display and beautiful red feathers. It would be an eye-catching addition to many rainforest aviaries, and is personally my favourite of the birds of paradise. And yeah, it's just, we need to get some birds of paradise in Planet Zoo if we get aviaries. Like, they're just too cool to pass up on, because we do actually have Ragiana bird of paradise in captivity around the world, so they're certainly an option. So for those who have followed my channel for a while, you'll know I have a soft spot for this animal right here, the false gharial, also known as the Tomistoma. So this species is from Southeast Asia, being found on the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra and Borneo, found in many of the freshwater river systems in those regions. And they are an endangered species, so it was only very recently that they were updated from vulnerable to endangered, which is a shame because they are very cool reptiles. Certainly different in appearance to the true gharial, so they do have shorter jaws, but thin nonetheless, perfect for catching fish. But they will also feed on reptiles, mammals, birds, all sorts of stuff that the regular gharial would not touch. And they're also one of the only crocodilian species that does not display parental care, so they will actually just lay their eggs in a nest and abandon them to their fate. I know I'm not really selling it too well here, but they are my favourite of the crocodilians just because they are so unique and look so prehistoric. But yeah, if we were to get the false gharial, I'd certainly appreciate it. Next is the peacock mantis shrimp, one of the most colourful of all crustaceans, and one of the most notorious, as this family of crustaceans is known as thumb splitters. And I can tell you why. It's because they can strike with a similar caliber to a bullet. So when you house them in an aquarium, you actually have to house them in bulletproof glass to actually sort of securely keep them in, even though they could probably bust through it. But it's better to be safe than sorry. But yeah, so when they strike, they create a superheated bubble that can burn to the same heat as the surface of the sun, and basically cooking and stunning their prey when they strike it. So they're very interesting and can see colours that we cannot. But yeah, just a very cool little animal found in the coral reefs of the Indo-Pacific. Another species that I personally really like is the fishing cat. If it was to be added, it would basically be the equivalent of the felid equivalent of the bush dog. As while the bush dog deep dives, so would the fishing cat, as this species is well known for diving into water to hunt fish. So they certainly live up to their name and actually have webbed feet to help them swim better. But they're a very cool little cat, and yeah, I just like to see them because they are very nice. Now I'm going to try and go a little bit quicker now because I don't want this video to be too long because we do have a good few animals to get through. So let's just go quickly and say we've got the golden pheasant, the giant moray eel, which I picked over the green moray because the green moray, even though it's quite popular, I just think the giant moray is just a much more intimidating and more interesting animal personally, because you see the green moray everywhere. But the giant moray just has that kind of presence that I think Planet Zoo could use in its aquariums. And one of my favourite cephalopods, the flamboyant cuttlefish. A highly venomous species, probably the most venomous of all cuttlefish, but also quite small as well. So they're not exactly a species that necessarily stands out unless you're purposefully looking for it. But they do have these bright colours that they only maintain when they're under threat. And are actually well known for galloping along the sea floor. So a unique little behaviour that I'd certainly like to see recreated. We have also the reef manta ray, the great hammerhead shark, the New Caledonian giant gecko, another species I've actually met in person, and they are very cool. Like the detail that Frontier would be able to put onto one of these is just insane. We have the banded archerfish, living up to their name as they shoot jets of water to knock insects off of the branches above. The Atlantic puffin, the weedy sea dragon, one of the Australian coast's most colourful residents. The western capercaillie, one of my favourite birds in all of Eurasia. A bird that I am truly shocked that we do not have yet, the helmeted guinea fowl, a very common species in both the wild and in captivity, and certainly one that I'd certainly love to see brought to life in Planet Zoo just because of their striking pattern. their colourful heads, but also their wonderful vocalizations that are just iconic to the African bush. My personal favourite bird in the world, the great hornbill, the short-beaked echidna, the wonderful zebra shark, a species I have been lucky enough to meet in person, the West Indian manatee, certainly an animal that the community really wants to see, and honestly I would love to see it too. It'd be just a very cool and peaceful animal to have in an aquarium. The sea otter, one of the smallest marine mammals, only just larger than its relative, the marine otter from South America. The walrus, one of the largest of the pinnipeds, but certainly one of the most distinct, with those huge tusks that the males can sport, and the females have them too. But yeah, they're fairly rare in captivity, but certainly an iconic animal of the Arctic. The Australian pelican is my pelican choice, just because, as I know a lot of people really want the great white pelican, but for me personally, I much prefer the homegrown pelican. But no, the Australian pelican I just feel stands out a little bit better, because you do have a fair bit of colour on the beak there, and also around the eye, but also the wings have black feathers. It's not just all white, like it is, I believe, with the great white pelican. I think they do just have white feathers. I could be wrong. They could actually have more colours than I'm giving them credit for, but personally, the Australian pelican is my preferred species. The secretary bird, the Geoffroy's spider monkey. The cotton-top tamarin is probably my favourite of the tamarins because of their punk rock hairstyle, but also compared to the golden lion tamarin, I much prefer this guy just because it's all not just one colour. So like you have a bit of variation in the pattern, but also I've actually seen a cotton-top tamarin. I've actually never seen a golden lion tamarin. So it's sort of just personal familiarity for me, and you can't deny that is a cute little face. The South American coati, the southern ground hornbill, one of my favourite birds in all of Africa, not just because it's a hornbill, but also they are very unique. They are also specialist snake hunters, as you can see with this unlucky puff adder. But one unique thing about them, or just interesting tidbit, is that the females only produce young every 9 years. So they will raise their chick until adulthood, and then after 9 years of raising that chick, then they will be able to have another chick. And they can live for quite a long time, I think 80 years or so. So yeah, they have a very long lifespan, so probably about 8 or 9 chicks in that lifetime. The Toko toucan, one of the most iconic of all birds. The alligator gar, personally one of my favourite freshwater fish, and just an incredible species that I'd love to see displayed in an Everglades exhibit. The gaboon viper, for those who participated in the quiz, you will know that this snake has the longest fangs of any snake on the planet, and is also the heaviest viper in all of Africa, and just a very beautiful looking snake. The tuatara, possibly the most unique reptile on the planet, as it is the only member of its genus that remains. I think actually only member of its family that remains, because the rhynchocephalians are a very ancient group that existed during the time of the dinosaurs and have existed afterwards, but the tuatara is the last species that remains. The musk oxen, the formidable harpy eagle, one of my favourite eagles, one of the most powerful in the world, and certainly a rare sight in the wild. And so having them in Planet Zoo would just be an absolute treat, because it is a species that is just absolutely iconic of the Amazon rainforest. The Patagonian mara. When it came to chameleons, I had a range of choice. I could have picked the obvious panther chameleon, or the veiled chameleon, but instead I decided to go with the Parsons chameleon because it is larger than both of those, and also is probably more colourful as well in certain variations. So like chameleons can change a whole range of colours, and so the Parsons chameleon, both being a decent size and being of a diverse range of colours, it fits the bill for me for what I want in a chameleon. The red-rumped agouti is probably one of the most important animals in the Amazon, being one of the only animals able to break the nut shell of the Brazil nut, and so is crucial in the dispersal of its seeds. The Atlantic mud skipper. I just think Planet Zoo needs a mud skipper. Like, it's one of the only fish that would make sense in the current game. But yeah, if we would get it in Planet Zoo 2, yeah, it'd be a real treat. The most photographed bird on the planet, the lilac-breasted roller, is just way too colourful and beautiful of a bird to miss out on for the aviaries. The ancient horseshoe crab, specifically the Atlantic horseshoe crab, best known for coming to the shores of the eastern United States to breed, and are just one of the most interesting of all invertebrates, because I believe I read somewhere that they're not actually crabs and are somewhat closely related to arachnids actually. But yeah, they're a very interesting group of animals. They have blue blood, which is another interesting fact, and if you should definitely do a bit more research to learn a lot more about them, because they are just fascinating creatures. One of the longest of all the monitor lizards, the crocodile monitor, a species that would certainly complement the addition of climbing monitor lizards in Planet Zoo 2. Like, hopefully we can get that for baby Komodo dragon, Nile monitor, and Asian water monitor, and the crocodile monitor on top of that. Another one of my favourite reptiles is the Cuban crocodile, a critically endangered species endemic to Cuba, best known for being fairly aggressive, but also having a wonderful gallop that they are able to do, being one of the only crocodiles that can properly run after its prey. The tufted capuchin is here because personally I prefer this species over the white-faced capuchin. It is a species that I think is just the better choice, as I think they are more common in captivity than the white-faced, and also they're fairly famous too. Like, if you ever watch Night at the Museum, this is the species that portrayed Dexter. And yeah, I've seen these guys several times in zoos, and they're certainly the most common of the capuchins in Australia, and probably most of the Eastern Hemisphere. Like, you generally just see these guys over other capuchin species. The king cobra, the alligator snapping turtle, the eye, the greater roadrunner, white-faced whistling duck, the burrowing owl, which out of all the owl species would probably be the most interesting, as it is an owl, but it comes out during the day and also lives in its own burrow, so goes against most things that you'd assume an owl would be doing. So they're just very cool little owls. The Parenti, Australia's largest lizard, and certainly a species that I think would complete the Australian terrestrial roster. When I had to pick a squirrel, I was thinking of a whole range of species, because there are a lot of squirrels in the world, but I in the end chose to go for the Southeast Asian Prevost squirrel, as it is probably one of the more common species of squirrel in captivity. The largest parrot, at least largest flying parrot in the world, the hyacinth macaw. The beautiful Inca tern. The haunting common vampire bat. I picked this guy because we have two flying foxes in the game, well, fruit bats, But I think it makes sense that we get sort of a more conventional bat as well. And what better than possibly the most famous bat on Earth, the one that inspired the myths of vampires across the planet. The Sunda slow loris, one of few venomous mammals, and one of very few venomous primates. So they're a very interesting species and would certainly work well with nocturnal exhibits. The Asian arowana is certainly a fish that I would like to see in Planet Zoo 2, just because it is a species that can be quite colourful in its variations, and also is able to be displayed alongside a range of different animals. So like imagine you have a gharial exhibit. Gharials are not able to eat arowana because they are too large for their jaws. So you could have these fish swimming alongside your gharials. An animal that you shouldn't have swimming alongside anything, the electric eel. Certainly one of my favourite fish, just because they are, pardon the pun, shocking. But they are absolutely incredible animals, a marvel of nature. And yeah, fun fact though, they aren't actually eels. So they are actually more closely related to catfish and carp. And will actually gulp air at the surface, because they do generally live in some fairly oxygen poor waters. So having the ability to gulp air certainly is a useful adaptation for a fish of this size. The yellow-footed rock wallaby, like we do already have a wallaby in the game, but I think these guys are just the most colourful of the wallabies, and it would be a great desert species for an Australian section, and certainly an animal that could utilise the climbing mountain. It would just be a very cool species to see just hopping around on rocks, because you can't really do that with kangaroos and red-necked wallabies because it's just not in their nature. But with a rock wallaby, it would certainly be something that you could create some unique behaviour habitats with. The southern carmine bee-eater, possibly my favourite of the bee-eaters, just because they can be found in massive flocks and live in the muddy walls of riverbanks in Africa. The laughing kookaburra, the adorable pig-nosed turtle, the hyper-colourful rainbow lorikeet, certainly an animal that I'd like to see in a walk through Avery. The iconic frill-necked lizard. The red-bellied piranha. The numbat is an interesting one, so not a lot of people outside of Australia would probably even know what a numbat is. So this is an adorable little marsupial from Western Australia, but possibly the most interesting thing to a majority of people would be that it is the only living relative of the extinct thylacine, and certainly it would be a nice way to pay tribute to admittedly one of humanity's greatest mistakes, and that being the extinction of the thylacine. So, and these guys are threatened too, so we can say the numbat could sort of see it as almost a little bit of redemption. But yeah, they are adorable though. Not found in any zoos outside of Australia, but they have a long tongue that they use for hunting insects, and bright white stripes running down their backs, and a small bushy tail as well. A bird that I don't know how many of you would actually have heard of is the 12-wired bird of paradise. So birds of paradise evolved in a whole range of different forms from one crow-like ancestor, and just took advantage of all different niches across Papua New Guinea. And the 12-wired bird of paradise is from the mountains, I believe, and yeah, has a black top, a yellow underbelly, red legs, and for tail feathers are these long silver wire-like feathers that it uses in its courtship display. So very interesting species, and another one of the very few birds of paradise found in captivity. The kea is one of the most intelligent of all parrots, well known for destroying the rubber on your car in the mountains of New Zealand, and just being a fairly big menace. but they are certainly charming characters and use their intelligence to solve all sorts of problems, and even to hunt shearwater chicks when they dig them out of their burrows. So they're certainly crafty and a little bit sinister, but an animal that I'd love to see boost some New Zealand diversity. The colourful mandarin duck, the charming Reeves muntjac, certainly would be the smallest deer that we'd get in the game, and are fairly widespread in zoos, found in a whole range of Asian exhibits, and an animal that would certainly stand out against most of the other ungulates. The adorable rock hyrax, and most people don't know that this animal is related to the elephant, the manatee, and the aardvark, and a few other species in the overall group of Afrotheria. The Japanese giant salamander, the wonderful radiated tortoise. If we were to get any Madagascan tortoise, radiated would be my top choice, as they are just so colourful, so beautiful, and very widespread, and smaller than all the other habitat tortoises, so help create a niche for itself. The only frog on this list, the Amazon milk frog, also known as the Mission golden-eyed tree frog, is one of the most strikingly colourful of all tree frogs, and also poisonous, as those bright colours are supposed to warn you of. And then our last animal is my favourite primate on the planet, the gelada, one of the most impressive of all primates, found in the mountains of Ethiopia. They have a almost entirely grass diet, they don't have any claws, and so they have these rather thick, blunt fingers for just picking grass and eating it. But as you can see, the most notable feature of the gelada is their ability to roll back their upper lip to give a truly terrifying display of their huge canine teeth, something that the current Hamadryas baboon cannot do. And they're fairly rare in zoos, as Ethiopia has specific animal exportation laws, so none of their endemic species are able to be exported out of the country, so nothing like your Ethiopian wolves, walia ibex, or mountain nyalas, or even geladas anymore. But there is a population of geladas in captivity around the world, as they were exported before that act was put in place. But yeah, they're certainly a really cool primate and would certainly stand out against the roster of other primates that we have. That is my list. I can already hear you guys in the comments now saying, where's the American black bear? Where's the black and gold howler monkey? Where's the grey crown crane? Just not here. Like, they're not necessarily species that I find are necessary for me personally. Like, this is just my list of animals that I would love to see, and that would add a good bit of diversity for my zoo builds. But like, of course those animals are probably going to get in. They are some of the most requested by the community, but they're just not really animals that I'm necessarily interested in building for, as I've never seen any of them. I don't really have any relation to any of them in any way. We don't have any of them in our zoos here in Australia, but we do have a majority of, well, I say a majority, a few of the animals that you see in this video in our zoos here in Australia. Like, it's just personal familiarity for me. Like, I prefer to build for animals that I've seen in real life. That's just how I work. But yeah, let me know what your top 50 or top 100 animals. Like, this was originally going to be a top 50 video, but then there were more animals I was thinking of, so I just bumped it up to 100. But yeah, let me know your lists of animals that you want to see in Planet Zoo 2, and I'll see you all in the next one.